ready. All right, I would like to call the meeting to order, sorry for the delay. And for roll call, appointment of alternates, I don't think we have any alternates here tonight. And I'd like to welcome Don Eaton to our commission. He's a new member tonight. Going on to item 3, public hearings. Before we start, I'd like to call on Robin to tell us about tonight's.
Yes, so
agenda.
this application, I'm sure you guys saw my staff memo, unfortunately was submitted in error upon the recommendation of staff in the planning office. The wrong map was used when he was advised to make this application, and upon looking over this request for this meeting tonight, it came to my attention that the official inland wetland map actually does not show any wetlands, and that is in concurrence with the soil scientist report that was submitted. So Jordan is the applicant. So we've talked on the phone and talked about officially withdrawing the application, which would need the approval of the board. So essentially, that's what we're looking to do.
So okay, so we are not going to open the public hearing
No.
tonight. And so because there's no regulated area on this.
Correct. So
this-
essentially, what he was asking for was to amend our official map, but there's actually nothing to amend. The official map does not show any wetlands.
And it's been tested.
And it's
it
actually been
shows-
tested. He went and hired a soil scientist, tested it. They confirmed there are no wetlands on this parcel.
And for the benefit of the public, the wetlands are determined by soil tests.
Right.
And if there are no wetland soils, then there are no wetlands on the,
Correct.
And it's outside the upland review area?
There's no wetlands on this site at all. As a matter of fact, just so you guys can, and I did it at a smaller scale, real quick, so you could see kind of the official map, because there's actually no wetlands on our map in this area. The closest is off from, I'm trying to read this, Alder Road, Robin Road. And chat. So yeah, if you look in the Laurel Lane, Deepwood area, there's actually no wetlands shown on our official town map.
and this is this the town wetland, the town?
That's the
So there's
town's
no-
wetlands
No
map.
wetlands showing up at all?
Correct.
Question, will he be refunded any fees that he had to pay to come in front of this board, or do we have to make a motion? I don't think it's fair if he went through this and we're charging him a fee for nothing, basically.
Yes, and staff has spoken to that. The process for that is to request a refund of those fees from the Board of Selectmen, and staff has indicated to Jordan that we would support that request.
Well, since there really needs to be no map amendment because there are no wetlands on it as the map shows, and the
Right.
soil scientists have determined that, then there really should, there is nothing for us to
There's
act
nothing
upon
for you
tonight.
to act on, correct?
All right.
Madam Chairman, will you accept a motion to accept the withdrawal of the application?
Yes. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Madam Chairman, may we ask a question?
Let's see, Robin?
Sure, yeah.
Robin, this is from the town's website. What
That's
am I
the,
looking at?
that's the DEP layer, which is what was inadvertently given to the applicant. That is not our town official map.
Okay, so yours supersedes this.
It does.
All right.
They cannot amend that layer. That's not a layer that's amendable. When someone requests a map amendment, what they're requesting under state statute is to change our official map. Our official map doesn't show wetlands. And that is in accordance with the soil scientist findings out there also, so it matches.
So the soil scientist is really, the records from the soil scientists are what we go on.
We go by the water flowing through the
Right.
woods onto the property. That's what we go by.
all of our properties.
I understand there's overland drainage out there, and I'm not sure which one of you sent emails today with pictures. So we're aware of the overland drainage. Just to clarify, overland drainage is not the same as wetland soils in the state of Connecticut.
Can I-
It's strictly defined by soil type.
Can I I just
Not,
like
we're
to.
really not supposed to be
Okay.
taking public comment.
Okay.
This isn't a public hearing and the application was withdrawn. Any of you are welcome to reach out to me in the office. I'd be happy to talk with you. Okay?
Yeah, but by state's regulations, we can't continue. All right. So, I'm sorry that you all came tonight, but thank you for your participation. and-
That's okay if I don't know, right?
You may.
I don't need to.
Yeah.
Good luck, everybody. Good luck.
All right.
Bye, Helen.
That takes care of the old business as well.
One moment. Marjorie, this is Grant. He's actually a new alternate to the board.
Oh, welcome.
Welcome. Come on up, sit with the board.
All right, well, we. Welcome, Grant.
First meeting.
All right.
Wow.
Are we full now?
I think we are. We just had new appointments, one or two.
Grant, welcome.
I think we may be.
That is wonderful. So Grant, I mean, we do have no, Chuck is an alternate, so I don't think we have any openings tonight. So.
Okay,
as-
I just came to sort of
You
Wonderful.
can sit and observe, and it
That's
will be
right.
great. Yeah.
observe. Thank you.
All right.
His last name for the notes?
Gritzmacher, Gritzmacher.
Right. So that moves us up, since there's no old business, it's the same as the public hearing. New business, receipt of new applications.
We have none.
All right. Which moves us on to the general commission business. In your packet, there was some information. I know I went last Monday or a week ago Monday, to the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. They are trying to push forward enabling legislation to allow towns to take part in perhaps, or perhaps not, getting their names onto the enabling legislation so that they can have a fee, a buyer's fee when buying property that would be designated for land acquisition and stewardship for open space. If your name of the town does not go on the enabling legislation, then you would not be allowed to do it. If your name does go on the enabling legislation, you still have the option of opting out of it. Yes, exactly. And this has been tried for several years. It hasn't passed through yet. At the moment, we don't have any way of, we haven't a line item on our budget for, the town's budget for management of open space. This is one way of doing it that the town could do. I don't know if there would be the political will to do it, but it would be one way of opening the discussion towards how we're going to fund the open space that we do have. So did everyone read the package?
I did read this. I just got a couple of questions. So what you just stated earlier in the meeting, does that mean if we proceed with this, Simsbury will be on the list?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's up to the voters in this town or the Board of Selectmen or someone else on whether or not we proceed forward with this?
Yes, it wouldn't be our decision. It would be, the only reason we brought it before the Conservation Commission was if we wanted to encourage the discussion of how we're going to fund our open space, we could ask the Board of Selectmen to put the town's name on the enabling legislation. And then the discussion would have to go from there to see whether or not the town would want to do that process for funding. If we don't get our name on the legislation, then we would not have that option to discuss at a future date, the buyer's fee. There's already a seller's fee on purchase of property, but there's not a buyer's fee. There is some reluctance with, I think, the real estate groups to impose a fee of this sort. So there would be resistance to that. But it's one of the options that might be available to us to fund open space acquisition and stewardship. And the concern is that if we do not get the town's name on the enabling legislation. And there are several towns, I think about 10 towns in the state that would like their names on the enabling legislation. If we don't get our name on the enabling legislation, there may be reluctance in the future to open the bill and further and at a future date and tamper with the enabling legislation, and so it'd be kind of closed out. So,
The option the town would have, once it got its name on the list, would not only be to impose a fee or not, but it has opportunities to tailor that
Yes.
fee. So I think the going in position excludes the first $150,000?
$150,000.
So the first $150,000 of the purchase price would be exempt by state law. Simsbury could say, well, no, we'll let the first 200
Yes.
go. And our percentage is this, not that.
Up to 1%,
The
yes.
town could tailor it as it saw fit. But in order to be in a position to do that tailoring and make that kind of decision, it first must get on the list. It's an odd law.
It is.
It's an odd proposal. It was, I think, initially suggested that all towns have this option. And for reasons I don't entirely understand, some towns just didn't want it. Don't give us that choice.
Yeah.
And therefore, it migrated into this other model where you could either be in the list of towns with this option or not.
And there are other states that have it on a statewide basis. There are some states that have it on a townwide basis, or a town basis. There are some towns in New England that do this, have this fee. They found it to be successful. I think that was in the package, I hope. But I brought it forward to see whether the Conservation Commission wanted to send a letter requesting the Board of Selectmen put that on. At least it would open up the discussion of how to fund, that we need to be exploring options for funding our open space. That we've gone to the trouble of purchasing and protecting, but we need to know how to manage them, and we need to have funds to do so.
When you say managing open space, what does that mean?
Maintaining, I mean,
Ma-
maintaining,
maintaining-
invasive species control, tree removal along trails that might be a hazard to the public.
So, all right,
It's also
so
acquisition.
this might be a misunderstanding on my part. So the money would be used to maintain currently owned open space. It would not be used to purchase open space.
It could be.
It could be,
It could be
okay.
used for that as well. So it could set up a fund for potential acquisition, especially for matching grants. If the state does have money for matching open space property purchases, then we could use, the town could use that money towards the matching grant aspect of a purchase of open space land.
And just a couple of curiosity questions here. So this legislation at the state level, is it something that's going to be renewed every year, or is this like a one-time, you get on the list, all or nothing deal? You know, but being its politics, it could change when the wind changes, right?
Well, I think the more of the concern is that once the legislation is passed, those towns that are on it have that option. If you're not on that list, that labeling legislation may not be opened up again and changed at a future date.
And there's no sunset time on this legislation?
You can opt out of it at any time.
Okay.
You can do it or not do it, but if you don't sign up, you can't do it.
So if this board votes for this, all as we're asking the selectmen to do is to just basically say, we want to be on this list, and then we'll have a further discussion with the town and the taxpayers on how we want to proceed with
We're
this.
not in a position to do any of that. We're just asking, we could ask the town to put the town's name on the list. John Hampton is going to be working on this bill. It did not make it out of committee last year. It is a funny piece of legislation. But, you know, it's one of those things that we don't have to go forward with, but if we don't put our name on it, we can't.
Right.
Have that
No,
Yeah.
I agree to that point. I mean, it's kind of like we should have the opportunity that's there, but at the end of the day, we gotta let the taxpayers
Oh,
decide
yes,
how we
they
wanna
would-
proceed on
yes.
this.
I mean, we're not in a position to do that.
right.
That's for the Board of Selectmen and the
Yeah,
Board of
I think
Finance
it
to
would be the
decide.
Board of Selectmen
Yeah.
as the town's legislative body, not
Yes.
the individual taxpayers as a
No.
kind of referendum.
That, I'm sorry, I'm learning Simsbury 101 here. So does the town do referendums on tax overrides like that? Or can they?
Let Mike Payne, Mike, do you know?
Well, see, I'm
don't
sorry,
know,
I grew up
or
in
is it-
Mass, so in Mass, everything goes on the ballot. So,
Typically, anything that goes on our election cycle, during the elections, is decided on by either the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen. I would have to talk to the town attorney to find out. I don't recall, even though the Board of Selectmen approve a lot of the language is typically directed by the town attorney.
And-
So
and-
okay.
And it would
I'm
go,
not sure.
and I'm sure the Board of Finance would have input into it too.
We
It's-
typically have language for
Yeah.
the budget side of stuff, but this would be more legislative.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm thinking that's more of a fall election.
We do understand that the CLCC will probably develop some model ordinance kind of language that would be available for
Yeah.
consideration.
I mean, right now, there's not even a bill number or anything like that, so. Would the commission be interested in writing a letter to the town requesting that we put the town's name on this enabling legislation?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been a really common point of discussion here,
we need
funding
money.
these
Yeah.
ideas that we have here, and
Yeah.
there's, never a dedicated source of money for, especially for maintenance.
And it might start the conversation, when this discussion of this comes up, start the discussion, what's the best way of funding that,
Right.
of those things?
I agree with Commissioner Morrison. I think this is a splendid idea.
Good.
Just my opinion, I'm not a fan of taxes, okay, especially in Connecticut. But this is a tool we can use, and if the voters decide they want to do it, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm
But-
kind of the same school of thought. Well, I don't like the idea of more taxes for the sake of discussion. I think it's valuable to at least open the discussion.
All right. So, would you like to make a motion? Should we write a letter?
I move that the commission ask the chairman to write a letter to the Board of Selectmen urging them to avail themselves of the opportunity to list Simsbury among the towns that would have the opportunity to impose such a fee should it choose to do so.
All right, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much, and I'll have the letter sent around to everybody before we send it in. All right. There's another item I'd like to include on the commission business. Do we need to make an amendment to the commission business?
To add it,
All right.
yeah.
This is for something that came up last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting about Belden Forest. So I'd like a motion to amend the agenda to include an item, switch 2 with 3, inserted between 1 and 2.
I'll make a motion that we amend the general commission business in between 1 and 2 to add the Belden Forest discussion.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Mike, would you like to tell us what happened at the,
Sure. I believe Robin's handing out some of the information we got. Last night, we got a volume of information. If you go to the Board of Selectmen's meeting notes, we have a lot of information that we got given last night, specifically regarding a recommendation that came out of the Open Space Committee to take the Belden Forest property, that is town property, and make that apply for an application to be part of the old growth network, is that correct?
Yes, old growth forest designation.
Forest designation. And by doing that, we are not legally obligating the town to do anything other than getting under their umbrella. There is a portion of that property that meets that criteria. If it's not old growth today, it's nearly old growth. So it would fall into that. At last night's Board of Selectmen meeting, while we did not take a vote, there was a general consensus that we would very much like to make that application at our meeting 2 weeks from yesterday. So hopefully we can get a favorable vote or consensus from this board that it's something you would like us to do. I'll do my best to answer questions. Hopefully Robin is better at some of the technical stuff than me. But there was a lot of documents last night that staff put together dealing with both the original deed and restrictions on it, and none of them were in conflict with the old growth criteria.
And the deeds show that there's, the logging is not permitted
The actually original deed allowed
for the owners of
the owners and their descendants to take 5 cord of wood and a number of board feet off of the property. To my knowledge, nobody has done that in decades. So other than frankly keeping the paths open, which would probably, I can't envision how we would necessitate cutting trees down to do that. It's really just keeping it safe for people to walk.
And part of the argument was that this would be a potential, I know after it came up at the Open Space Commission meeting last week, that after Cathedral Pines, which was blown, Cathedral Pine was the really big old white pine trees area in Cornwall, Connecticut. And second to that was listed that the next valuable stand of white pine was Belden Forest. So unfortunately, Cathedral Pines blew down.
Yes, it was destroyed.
So Belden Forest is the inheritor of that mantle, shall we
Yeah.
say.
Yes, it is.
I know we had a lot of discussion at the, years of meetings that we had discussing these things, and we did hear a lot about Belden Forest at that time. We were really concerned with the Onion Mountain property, but I just wanted to hear from the commission whether they support this. I know there's a somewhat arbitrary rush to get this designated because there are other properties in Connecticut that would like to have this designation as well, and that Simsbury is looking to be the first.
It would be nice to be first. I would not, I don't want the board or commission to feel pressured that we're in a rush to do this to be first. And frankly, one of my concerns was that the town's hands were not tied by seeking this designation, and they are not.
No.
We can actually relinquish it if somewhere down the road the group feels that, the town feels that it is not something they now want to do. I can't imagine why,
Yeah.
but.
Wasn't that also the idea that this would be a positive tourist opportunity for the town, and that it might encourage people to go and
Especially for a site that is close to the center of town, it's not
little pocket forest?
Talcott Forest or the Ridge or Onion Mountain, which are kind of tougher to get to. It's much closer to the center of town. And so having read through the documents that we were given for our meeting last night, I did not see anything that was frankly a negative. And I was concerned that I would find something that made it less palatable.
And was it unanimous or support for this designation?
We didn't take a vote, but everyone spoke in favor of it, and frankly, they were all too happy to ask me to come back out tonight to talk to you.
As I recall, there were like 2 tiers to the network. There was like a tier where they would list the forest and put up a plaque, and then there was another tier where they would put like an easement on the property to protect it. Is that right?
I don't
There
remember.
were no easements
Easements.
or restrictions or anything
No.
on the deed. This is really, I'm not sure what the technical term is. To me, I look at it more as a blessing, that this area is this thing. There are no legal restrictions on the town, requirements on the town. There's not stuff we have to do or not do, which was frankly my biggest concern. A lot of times when you get these kind of things, they then require you, and do this, and do this, and do this, and pretty soon you hope to be here and now you're way over there. I did not see that in any of the documentation.
But they still allowed maintenance, like, yes. So invasive plant
The idea is
removal
to really-
and hazardous trees.
Keep the forest so that people can go in, they can't see what it is, what it's all about, and have access to it, and not create more paths and everything else.
This proposal came to this commission in October of 2017. It was suggested, we were asked if we would please go to the Board of Selectmen and recommend this designation to the Board of Selectmen. And this commission declined to do so. And we did so and there was not unanimity, to be sure, and we didn't adopt a resolution. You don't need a resolution to do nothing. There were a number of factors that we had in mind. One was that the town really hasn't looked, and let me preface this by saying I'm a great fan of Belden Forest, and I've walked there within the last couple of weeks. I walk there on a regular basis. But the town had not looked at Belden Forest, nor has it yet, I believe, to make an assessment of whether the town thinks it's a suitable thing to do to that piece of land. I can tell you that when we walked through there were a number of widowmakers, things that ought to have been taken down before the public was invited to walk in there. And if you want to raise this parcel to something that is attracting a lot of tourists, that implies a maintenance burden way beyond what you have heretofore done. But beyond that, it didn't seem to the majority of the commission at that time that the designation really amounted to anything. It's a plaque and a promise of some publicity. But as Commissioner Morrison pointed out, in the thinking of the network, it is a two-step process. And I communicated at that time with the president of the network, because they are not asking you at the moment for an easement, but that's their next step. That's their usual method, is to designate and then arrange for someone to get a conservation easement over the property. They don't do it themselves. They want another entity, a third party, presumably some kind of conservation organization, to hold a conservation easement over the property. And that would restrict what the town can do if you agreed to it. The majority of the commission at the time did not think the town should tie its hands and agree to such an easement, because easements are in perpetuity, and none of us knows what that property might want or need in years to come. And even without the easement, if you need to make a decision to deal with the property in a way that's not consistent with the old growth model, then you've got a PR problem, an embarrassment, an impediment of the designation. Just you have to work around that to do what you think needs to be done. If you have the easement, then you've got a problem. But it seemed to the majority that the designation without the easement really didn't have any substance. That all you were getting was a plaque and maybe some publicity, and no help with managing the property. And so it seemed to the majority at that time that there is nothing being brought to the table by the network the town couldn't do for itself. The town can look at the property, get into it, deal with it completely, promote it, and tailor its own publicity message to the property and to the audience. That the town can do all this without the designation, without involving a third party in ways that would likely be, at least offer the possibility of being problematic in the future.
Your points are, raise some good points. I personally am not interested, nor will I accept any easements from anybody else on town property. They can ask all they want, thank you very much, have a nice day. That will be my personal response. I don't think the rest of the selectmen are interested in that also. They are interested in this designation, and frankly, that is it. I don't know what other people are going to do, what they're gonna come do back and ask. I am fairly confident that the rest of the Board of the Selectmen would not be in favor of granting any easements. Frankly, that Beldenwood property has some pretty significant, I'm not sure restrictions is the right word, but the deed is very specific about what we allow and everything else. So I'm very comfortable with how the town ended up with that property 80-something years ago, and they did a very good job protecting that property, in my opinion. But you are very correct in one of your statements, Don, about easements and perpetuity and everything else. I try never to say never,
Yeah.
because it usually backs you into a corner, but I am not in favor of having someone else tell us how to use the land that the town owns.
And that's consistent with the view of the majority here in October of 2017.
Yeah, but that was, we didn't want an easement.
Yeah.
Although
And
we
so-
were intrigued, but some of us, not all, were intrigued with the designation to promote. And while I agree the town can do a pretty good job of promoting itself, I think it was one of the reasons why we joined. We could have also promoted bicycling in Simsbury, but we chose to join a bicycle consortium or something that would publicize us beyond
Biking
our
club.
biking club, beyond our town borders. So I think it's more of seen that way, that this is not just a Connecticut organization, it's not just a New England organization, it is a national organization. There are no easements.
As I remember, I mean, it's a national organization,
Starting.
but I don't think that there were any forests designated in the Northeast yet, right? I don't think
There
it was
are,
even just
there will
Connecticut.
be.
There's none in Connecticut. I believe there are some in the Northeast. I'm not positive.
Yeah, I remember there being a cluster in
And there are
the
several
mid-Atlantic.
that are looking, Enders Forest is looking to do it, and there's several other places in Connecticut that are now looking to do it. I think when we first saw it, there was something like 50 or something, they're now up to 96 or
There's a lot of
something.
people talking about it.
And it's another one of those, it's like the enabling legislation, you can opt in, you can opt out. As far as the Widowmakers, Don, I think that would be one thing that we could take to the town saying, we need a line item designated. Here we've got this beautiful thing, we want to promote people coming to it, we need management funds.
Yeah, well, my bigger concern is that in the document here, it
Maintenance
says
funds.
that the designation would not be consistent with the draft forest management plan for that property. And I know that wasn't adopted, but is the idea that we would get a new management plan?
Or,
That is a separate issue. The Belden Forest, I do not believe, again, my personal opinion, we will not have in Simsbury one forest management plan for all of the town parcels. I personally believe we need to do more site-specific as to what we want out of that. Different properties have different deed restrictions on them
Right.
and different uses.
Yeah.
Again, my personal opinion.
I think that's right. I mean, my thought is that this is, the designation is really putting the cart before the horse. Because if we put this designation on the property without a forest management plan, is that going to tie our hands in the future? Are we going to be able to manage the forest the way that we would want to?
it's not logging, you
This
can't,
this designation does not restrict what the town wants to do with the property.
but the deed does restrict,
The deed does, but that's there now.
yes.
But then that brings it back to what's the point? of the designation. If it's, I mean, if we can have any forest management plan that we want for the forest, then,
Well,
I mean, really, what's the point of the designation, right?
I think it's
I
a
mean, what are we saying with that designation? If,
Seems like window dressing.
Well, I
yeah.
think it's a recognition that we have a very wonderful treasure here in town, in this particular Belden Forest. I know Connor Hogan from McLean has been out there looking at it. He knows the trees, and he thinks it's an absolute gem. I think it's just something to recognize that we value this piece of property as an old-growth property. We can go in and take down the widowmakers, we can take out the invasive species, but it's not one where we're looking, as some of the other management plans said, we'll raise a little money that we'll put towards the maintenance, that the money will not come from timber harvesting for maintaining this piece of property, which was one of the goals of that thing, and I'm not sure it's consistent with the deed.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's a whole lot that we've talked about,
Yeah.
and that's
And we
one of
didn't
the
really
issues.
discuss
But I mean, it really seems to me that
management
that until we have a plan, something written that we can say this is what we want to do with the forest, then we're really, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves with the designation, because the designation says this is going to be old growth forest, and it's going to have these restrictions on it, and
I would disagree. It does not say restrictions.
Do you guys have a copy of the agreement?
It's-
I don't know if I copied that part for you. I tried to keep the copying down to a minimum.
I
because it was
understand.
a
I mean,
lot
I
of
know
stuff.
that the
Certain
I
expectations.
know the restrictions aren't legally binding or really binding in any way, but,
And to be fair, during our discussion of the Onion Mountain Forest Management Plan, we did not really discuss the Belden Forest Management Plan.
Belden Forest Management Plan, Madam Chairman, I do not believe has ever been approved.
That's it.
It's a-
So we
it's a-
really don't
it's a
have.
draft.
Yes, and it's old now.
yeah, my point is just that I think we should have a plan before we put the designation.
Well, we'll get into that whole issue of who's going to do this. I mean, the idea of between maintenance and management, which became a hotly contested issue here for a thing, and whether we have a plan for the forest, however you call it. The plan could be, just based on what we know now, that these are old trees, magnificent old trees. I mean, this doesn't preclude us from coming up with a plan later on. I mean, at some point, if we come up with a plan for how we want to maintain this forest, that can be we can always opt out of this designation. We can work within the designation. We can decide, this is not precluding anything. It's just giving us a concept that we already know that these are magnificent old trees.
If we
That would
vote,
qualify.
if we vote yes for this on this board, aren't we just recognizing that it's an old-growth
Yeah.
forest?
That we would,
I mean,
yes.
I have no problem with that, and I do agree with you guys that there should be a management plan, but if we vote tonight that it's an old-growth forest,
Or we'd
And
like to
then
be
we-
called
and we
under this.
just
Yeah.
make a recommendation that, they need a plan to maintain this old-growth forest.
To say that it's an old-growth forest is not the same as saying that it should be designated within the network. It's a different question.
Understood.
But what would be the harm in designating it within the network?
I have a disaffection for meaningless gestures. And it would
Well,
be,
then,
it would be a meaningless gesture. In the
I'm not
absence,
sure. It would, right now, Belden Forest is not getting its recognition that it is, I think it justly deserves.
shame on us for
I
not
think,
doing
honestly,
something about that.
honestly, I think a sign and some better parking would do a lot more than joining the old growth forest.
Perhaps, I mean, it seems like the Board of Selectmen is interested in doing it. Perhaps that would elevate Belden Forest to a level that they would actually pay attention to and get funding for.
It won't hurt.
It won't hurt. Right now, nothing's happening, but even a meaningless gesture might end up getting it more funding for maintenance and for publicity, which it's not getting at the moment. And there's enthusiasm on the part of the Board of Selectmen, with no hesitation. There's no interest on anybody's part in putting an easement. And I know that, you've got the nose of the camel argument that their usual method is to put an easement, but there has been no, I mean, we can certainly say no to that. So as far as meaningless gestures go, it might have some positive benefits. If we don't do it, I don't see that there are any positive benefits to not doing it.
I would agree.
Do we have statement?
I'll make a motion to include Belden Forest in the old growth forest network.
Do we have a second?
May I,
Well,
oh,
wait,
sorry.
wait,
I'm
first
sorry.
No, it's all right.
discussions, yes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion?
I think the motion should be to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they designate the.
Okay, I amend my motion that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we make Belden Forest to be included in the old growth forest network.
I would also, as a point of discussion, I would be in favor of the motion if it were to include also a recommendation that the Belden Forest have a proper forest management plan adopted, and that the signage and the parking be improved,
And the Widowmakers, too.
and the
Funding for maintenance.
funding for maintenance be provided.
We are doing through
Jim, do you want me to withdraw my motion and you can make it? I'm okay with that.
No, it's okay.
All right.
Can we, all of that in the, okay. Because there
I
is the
can't remember all that, Jim.
Just as an aside, there is an open space management, Parks and Rec and open space management plan that's in the works with Open Space Commission. They're going to be doing some hiring, there's, see who's going to be doing it, and all these things can come up during that process as well. Because they'll need to be there regardless of whether it's designated as old growth. These things will be coming up and coming before us, too. So-
And I do know, if I can add this, Madam Chairman, there are funds, I do not know the amount of them, that Planning Commission collects a fee in lieu of open space. I have no idea what's in the fund or anything else.
Or whether it's what it's designated for.
My recollection from when I was on the Planning Commission, that it was used for the acquisition of open space and the maintenance. Now, you could quickly use it up all one way or the other. I do not know how much money's in there,
I think we
but
need
that
to.
was a number of years ago.
I'm not sure how much is in there. We unfortunately don't do many subdivisions or re-subdivisions, which are where that fee is collected from.
Yeah.
We could certainly look into that. I'm not sure what, if any,
It's always been
in that.
a point of contention in the Open Space Committee that there wasn't much money there.
Yeah, and we almost always, recommend an easement or land. in
Yeah.
lieu of fee.
Although we did do one fee recently. All right. Yeah, so, all right,
Discussion.
so,
There's a motion and a second.
yes, do we have a vote? All in favor
Of the,
well, you had the motion.
Right.
Let's state the motion again.
Okay, I stated the motion to be very simple. I didn't include Jim's stuff, just to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we okay that the Belden Forest be included in the forest in the old growth forest network.
And do we have a second?
Wait a minute, what about Jim's stuff?
I also, too, as we recommend to the Board of Selectmen that a forest management plan be in place and that we look for signage and parking improvements in the area.
In place before the designation, or that it needs
we
to
just-
follow?
I think we recommend all of this.
Right.
Yeah, all right.
And funding,
maintenance.
and funding for
funding.
management.
And funding for maintenance.
And funding for
Funding for
maintenance.
All right, you-
Okay,
Second
that was the
that.
hardest thing I've done on this board yet, okay.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, so, thank you, and so, we don't need a letter, or do we need a letter?
Robin, I would think the motion would be
Sufficient.
So we can do the motion, or I can draft up a memo to the Board of Selectmen and send it to you for
That'd be
review
lovely.
and approval.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, excellent. All right, and so now we're on to item 3, approval of the minutes for December 18th, 2018, regular meeting. Are there any changes, additions, corrections? No, hearing none, we file them for the record. And do we have a motion for adjournment?
One
Oh, sorry.
small little
Sorry,
thing. No,
sorry.
this isn't on, I just wanted to make sure. This is the annual Wesleyan or biannual Wesleyan training. I'm not sure if any of you have ever attended before. For those of you who are new on the board, this is a great opportunity.
Yes.
It goes through, I don't think you gave me enough. I can get copies. If anyone is interested in attending, please get back to me as soon as possible. We're putting in to the finance department for any boards, commission members, and staff who's interested in going. It is on a Saturday, it is all day, but it's really worth the time to go. Like I said, especially if you're newer to the board, it goes over quite a bit of information. You get a big fat book to take home with you to learn more. So I highly recommend it.
Ooh.
And I failed to ask, are there any other things that anyone wants to talk about tonight? All right, good. So, motion for adjournment?
Motion, we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
So call you if I'm.
I have not. It's actually more common than.
Cool, thank you.
Or surface water, or.
Yeah.
It's very tricky. There are water.